Yeah, we're live. 7:01. Man, I just missed 7 o'clock. I'm trying to get it like right on the dot, but 7:01, that's close enough. How's everybody doing tonight? Tonight we want to talk about a couple of things. Actually, Jimmy was running his S2000 today with our G35 turbo. Now it's a modified S2000 motor. It's not a 2 liter. It's actually, I think right now it's 2.3 liter, but it has stock cams on it. It's got, I think, a stock head on it. It does have springs, stock intake manifold. Basically, it's that with our G35 turbo and an intercooler run on E85. And Jimmy's just put the motor together. It has 4 draws and pistons and all that stuff. So just now getting it broke in, but he started running it today on the dyno. And so we're going to do some guessing. We're going to guess how much power the thing makes. And so I'll tell you about all of the specs on the thing when we're guessing to find out how much power you guys think it's going to make. Also, we want to talk about wastegates. The thumbnail that I have up is our 50 millimeter wastegate for mature Oldenor performance. And there are 3 springs available for it. And there seems to be some questions on people. In fact, Lucky pointed this out. He said, well, what spring combination do I run? And we talked to him about that. In his case, he was gonna double up. He was gonna put 2 springs in it because if you're gonna start, you should start with more wastegate, as long as he's got the guys that are responsible for his tuning getting that done. And I like to start at low boost, sub 7 pounds if you can, and then make sure everything's right. I like to start NA and then go to low boost and then go to higher boosts when everything is right. You don't just start like, I can't understand somebody wanting to start out their tune like at 25 pounds. Okay, that's fine. That's not for me. Like I said, NA first, so we know what it does. And we're going to run Jimmy's motor NA also, so that we have an idea. We know now, because Jimmy and I, because this is what we do, we were talking about his S2000. He goes, okay, it's this and this and this and this. I said, okay, well, if we assign this NA power to it, and then we assign this boost level to it, that turbo is certainly capable of that, because that turbo is capable of 20 plus pounds on that thing fairly easily, and probably 30 or more. But at the boost level that we were testing it at, I'm like, okay, it should make this amount of power. And he's like, okay, I'm going to take a little more conservative approach. I think it's going to make this amount. So it turns out it makes a little more than both of us guessed. And when we were talking about this, we were like, okay, but what about the we call it the VTEC bump, and that doesn't have anything to do with it being a VTEC motor, other than or the VTEC itself. That has everything to do with whenever I do Hondas, whether it's a B series or a K series, or in this case it's an F series, whenever I test those, they tend to do better than the formula suggests. So if we're, if you got a 300 horsepower motor and at 14.7 pounds of boost, you think it's going to make 600, the Honda stuff tends to do better than that, especially when you have everything right. You have a good intercooler, you got good fuel, you got E85, the air feels right, you got enough timing in it and all that stuff. They tend to do better than that, more so than an LS does and other motors. I think it's because they got so much head flow relative to their displacement. That's kind of what I think. But so they tend to do fairly well. At any rate, we're going to talk about that tonight. We'll play a little guessing game, and we'll guess and see how much power you think it's going to make. And then Jimmy will be doing some more testing, and we'll be running more tests with higher boost levels, and then obviously different turbos and stuff. But I'm just happy that he worked very hard to build the turbo kit and stuff for it, and get it running. And so he was driving it around. So I think it did have some sort of noise that he addressed, but that's pretty normal for things that you're just putting together. So I'm curious to see, because I'm a dyno guy. It doesn't matter if I'm doing the dyno testing, whoever is doing the dyno testing, I'm just excited to see the results, because he's sending me over some graphs. I'm like, oh, that's cool. What about this? What about this? What about this? What if we try this amount of timing or whatever? Because right now he's just running it on the gate, basically, just with he has a controller for it. He has both a manual boost controller, one of ours that we sell, and so you guys can get those. He also has an electronic controller that he will control with his management system, which I think is a Link EFI setup, I think. And so he'll be able to control that and dial that in for the things that he wants to do, because I think he wants to take this on like road course tracks or something. And it'll be a driver and stuff as well. So it should, theoretically, the thing could make a lot of power. Hoping we can take these different turbos, this G35, the 3584, maybe even the 3770. We could try that one. And then maybe the G42, who knows? If we run 20 pounds on all those, what happens? And it will give guys an idea, both in terms of response rate, and then we'll also have temperature and all that stuff. So it'd be really, really good data. And then if we have data on this kind of motor, a really, really highly efficient, sub 2.5 liter motor, let's call it. And then we have also data on these turbos on 4.8 or 5.3, kind of things. And so when we get information on both sides of that, do we then kind of know what's happening in the middle? That's going to be more slanted toward this one. If we run an RB or a 2J, it's going to be more aimed toward the smaller ones and also the more efficient ones. And then if we run a Hemi or a small block 4 or big block or whatever, it's going to be more, the results will be more like this stuff over here. So all of that's really good information. So we can, we got like about 50 people here. So we can talk about our first thing we'll do is we'll talk about the wastegate. So the wastegate is the thumbnail that we have up is our 50 millimeter wastegate. We've got a couple of different springs. What I want to know, and this will be our poll for tonight. Should we label the wastegate springs to indicate how much boost spring? Okay, should we label the wastegate springs to indicate the boost level, basically how much each spring makes? Should we do that? Should we put something on the springs themselves? I know that a lot of the turbo smart. That's what I was trying to think of the other way. The wastegate guys I use on tile, but everybody, typically what they do, like with turbo smart, is they have color coded springs, and then you go on some lookup table and go, okay, this spring is worth this much. For me, it'd be easier if the thing was just, does it have the so we'll start a poll. If it was right on the spring, if it said something on the spring, you'd go, okay, that's a 7-pound spring or a 3-pound spring or a 15-pound spring or whatever it is. If it said it right on there and you put it in there, the problem with doing like little sticky labels on there is that the environment in there is not conducive to stuff that's not really designed to run like super high temperature. So that could become problematic. So it'd almost have to be engraved in there or something, but just something to indicate it. Or a little slip with the wastegate that says, hey, the one with the red stripe on it is this, the one with the green stripe on it is this, or whatever. And you can have that with you all the time, or put it up on your toolbox or whatever. That's also a possibility. And that's probably the reason that they don't come with a little tag on them that says, hey, look, this is a 7-pound spring, and this is a 10-pound spring, and this is a 15-pound spring. And then if you combine these two together, do you want us to basically label this or otherwise give you an idea on, what the springs are good for? So some of this stuff, and this happens too, we know, because I've had this happen to me with wastegates, and then also have had it happen where people question it, is what you'll put a wastegate on a combination and you'll say, okay, I have a 7-pound spring in there, but it opens up way earlier than that, or opens up way later than that. And the reasoning isn't because the spring isn't accurate. It doesn't, that it's resisting to that amount. The problem is that if it's opening up way earlier than that, it means you got a lot of back pressure. Like on a 7-pound spring, you shouldn't have that much back pressure. But if you had a bunch of back pressure, if you had a 15-pound spring or something like that, and you had a lot of back pressure, the back pressures want to push that open. And so the spring isn't responsible for that. It's just that it's working against the spring. Same thing with it opening too late. That could be a function of a poor exhaust manifold design that might be like the old stuff that we used to run on the Hondas, where the wastegate was positioned over just one of the exhaust tubes. Even though this was a cast manifold, the wastegate is just positioned over one. The other culprit can be that the opening for the wastegate is just not big enough. That the manifold or the tube that you have it could be at a weird angle. It could be too long. There be other things that are affecting wastegate performance that are not related to the spring. But the upshot or the end result is that the wastegate doesn't open at 7 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever. It opens way later than that or way earlier than that. But again, not a function of the spring. When everything is right, this spring will give you 7 pounds boost or 10 or 15 or whatever the number is, as long as you did the other things that are correct. And sometimes that's a big ask. So if you want us to label those or put something in there, just let me know. I think right now the poll is kind of going in that direction that, hey, yeah, you probably should do that. That's a good idea. So let's talk a little bit about we'll do our guess. We've got our poll up. We're looking good. Let's talk a little bit about the guessing game. You guys can throw some numbers out here. So we have this S2000 motor, which was originally a 2-liter or a 2.2, depending on what year it was. This one started out as a 2-liter, but it has a stroker crank. I'm thinking it's the 2.2 crank, probably, if that's a different stroker. I think it's actually a Brian Crowder piece that Jimmy has. And it has 4 rods, 4 pistons. He had a ported head on there, but you saw from an earlier discussion that it leaked. And so we took that off, replaced it with a stock head. It has valve springs on it and stuff to work with a camshaft. And then it has a stock intake manifold, I'm pretty sure. And it has a tubular style header turbo manifold. It has our G35 turbo on it. So it's a G35 1050. So that turbo is capable of 1,050 horsepower. And if it was going to make that, which I think it can, on any motor, it would be this kind of motor. So it would be a K series or an F series Honda is, for a turbo like that, is pretty much like cream of the crop if you're trying to make lots of power, because the motor's small enough. It's also really super efficient. It makes really good NA power for its displacement. And then, like I said, also has this VTEC bump situation where it tends to do better under boost than the formula suggests. So it kind of has all the things going for it. You don't run into hot side flow problems like you do on a bigger V8. On the smaller 4-cylinder, and then so you turn the boost up and you just keep getting more and more power output. And like on this motor, the motor's probably it was rated but at the factory at 250, so it's a pretty solid motor. They were pretty good and at fairly high RPM. I think Jimmy's going to 85 or 8700 or something on this motor. And it probably could go more if it was necessary. I don't remember now. Oh, it has stock cams in it too. The earlier stock cams, but stock cams nonetheless. And he's doing all the tuning, and so he's run it now at a couple of different timing levels and stuff. So it's running on E85. It is running 8 pounds because that's what the wastegate spring setup that he has in our 50 millimeter turbo and our 50 millimeter wastegate. The wastegate's big enough to control this turbo very well. So this thing comes up on, and I think it's coming into boost on the primary cam, and then obviously really kind of hitting home in the secondary cam. So this motor, this 2.3 liter motor, let's call it, fairly efficient. 8 pounds, 17 degrees of timing, and 8 pounds boost, 17 degrees of timing on E85. How much power does this motor make at the tire? Because this is measured on a chassis dyno. So somebody let me know what they think it makes. You guys can throw out some guesses out there. Guess the power output. Thoughts on running a boost controller on a centrifugal blower? You can't do that unless you have it bleed off pressure out of the blow-off valve on the discharge side of the blower, but otherwise that's not necessary. It was a good plan, but you soon will have a full-blown performance because you are going to keep testing and finding more stuff. What was the plan? Have one coming in the mail. Color and a legend. So you want to see descriptions for the wastegate springs. Color code, the top of the spring. Okay. Just color code 15 psi springs, 38 millimeter gate, and a log manifold that my B18 was making 12 pounds. Put a T and it made 17 pounds. Do you put a T with a bleed hole on it? Like we've done that too with, we've used T's. In fact, we've used T's in line and stacked the T's basically in line and then run carb jets. Just did a T, put the rubber vacuum line on it, and push a jet into the different jet sizes into the end of the rubber line of the T, and so it has a bleed orifice, so it bleeds out some of the signal to the wastegate, and that works. You just got to do a little bit of trial and error there. Getaway, what's going on? Yep, Merry Christmas to everybody. I'll be back on tomorrow, but I don't like running just on the spring. They creep open. I like electronic boost controllers. They don't creep open if you have the right amount of back pressure, but that can be an issue. And if you have control to the top of the wastegate, that's obviously better. It holds it closed until it reaches its desired boost level. Otherwise, it starts slowly opening as it gets closer and closer to that. Can you teach me how a manual boost controller works? I thought the PSI stops in the range of the wastegate spring. How does the controller work? A wastegate controller works by bleeding the signal from the turbo. It could be right at the turbo or it could be in the manifold, but the boost signal that goes to the wastegate, that's what opens the wastegate. So if you have a 7-pound spring and you reach 7 pounds of boost, what it does is that signal pushes up on the diaphragm against the spring, against the 7-pound spring, and opens the gate, opens the valve. If you trick some of that signal so that it's at 7 pounds and you bleed some of that out, then that signal going to open the gate might only be at 3 or 4 pounds. And so you have to run more boost in the manifold to get that signal to equal the 7 pounds that it takes to open the gate. But you might have 10 or 15 or 12, whatever, you'll have more boost in the manifold in order to achieve that, because it's that amount, minus the amount that you've bled off. Manual controller is just a variable boost leak. Yeah, that's true. Manual controller is just a controlled leak. Yep. Liberty guesses at 8 pounds, it makes 420. Thomas guesses 325. They're also pretty high compression. That helps a lot. Bill saying 450. Caleb saving 580 and 510 foot-pounds. On a 2.38 8 pounds of boost, that'd be pretty sporty. Yeah, to the tires, that's pretty ambitious. Just do the springs like Edelbrock does the carburetor Neil jet springs. They color code them. Yep. 398, rebuilding an LS1 for HPTE and time attack, 600 lift going to be too much for 6,700 to 7,000. Associated spring, cam is a Summit. The lift isn't going to care about that. You just need to have a stable cam to run in that RPM range. And if this is an LS, 67 to 7,000 RPM is not really that hard on stuff. 8 PSI, 17 degrees, E85, 380 wheel horsepower, 525. Yeah, that's a lot. Do you know when your 2026, your 100 horsepower cam turbo kits will be available? I don't. We don't have dates for that stuff. The cam hasn't even been tested yet, so that's a little ways off. That is a little ways off. But I mean, I already know. I already know the specs that I'm going to try. I just want to make sure that it's going to work, because while I'm fairly confident, my confidence grows exponentially when I run it on the dyno and it goes, hey, look, you've made this much power. Excited to see the testing on the cam. Yep. What size injector should I run in my 5.3 S10 sloppy stage 2 cam? And if yes, next gen 7875, I'm shooting for 600 wheel horsepower. Well, you should get our thousands. Go to richardholderperformance.com, get our 1,000 cc injectors, because you have to tune that combination anyways. So you might as well tune it knowing full well that on a 7875 next gen, that's a good turbo, and we've got nothing but good things to say about Byron over there. That turbo will support way more than 600 wheel horsepower. That's not the camshaft I would pick for that combination, but it'll work. I would pick a smaller cam, but it will work. But what will also happen is once you drive around for a while at 600 wheel horsepower, you're going to want 700, and like you're going to want to put E85 in it, and all those things are going to happen. So get the thousands. For the question, are the springs color coded? They are not right now. No. 465. Figuring the engine's not stock. Yeah, I went over what the engine is. The engine is bigger than stock. Forged internals, but stock cam, stock intake, stock cylinder head, and then just we'll call it a Super Jimmy turbo kit. It's a tubular header basically for the turbo with a very nicely done, by the way, for Jimmy. I mean, he knows what he's doing. He did HP Performance, so he's a turbo guy. With a Wastegate priority exhaust, which is good. And then a turn for the turbo. Do you or can you do a video on intake manifold air distribution to show how much air each cylinder is getting? Example, EFI intake versus carb intake. I already have those up. I have a distribution test we did on a truck manifold with nitrous, and we even cut the manifold in half to show you what's the convoluted stuff. There was some of that on when we did water meth injection too, where we showed a change in temperature and then correlated that with distribution of the water meth going through a convoluted manifold that was designed to flow only air. And then I did a carbureted manifold, single plane, where we ran it carbureted and then ran it with batch fire EFI, because it's also a port injected manifold. And then we ran it batch, we ran it sequential, and then we ran it sequential with individual cylinder tuning, showing you that manifold doesn't give you good distribution through the whole range, and it's changing through the RPM range. And the same thing with, oddly enough, with a truck manifold. The distribution on a factory manifold is not even. Did you run a distributor on a top speed Civic? Yes, a factory one. Any benefit to remove the share? But we did run an ignition amplifier on it though. Any benefit to remove the shared wall and an intake port in Siamese configuration for boosted applications? Possibly more flow, less pressure. What are you talking about? Which motor, like which engine family and which intake manifold specifically are you talking about? I'm going to guess 295. You don't want to Siamese runners, because if you Siamese runners on an EFI manifold or any kind of long runner manifold, what you'll do is you'll make it a short runner manifold, and it's going to change the way that it makes power. We did a lot of that back in the day on the tune port stuff where they did Siamese runners, and it hurts power, just like a short runner manifold does, hurts power through some of the curve depending on where you're merging them together. I'm new to the turbo game, so can I use a wastegate and blow off valve using springs, or do I need a boost controller with it on board? This is a 5.3 S10 with a cam and 7875. No, you can run a manual controller, which is just a knob that you turn that will adjust that. So you put the spring in the wastegate. Put the wastegate spring will be whatever the minimum boost that you want. So let's say you put a 7-pound spring in there, and then you can put a wastegate controller on there, which is just this knob with fittings on it that goes in line in between the line that goes to the wastegate. And so what you're doing is bleeding some of the signal off. So you can raise the boost with that knob by turning the knob by, sometimes you can about double the amount of boost. So if you have a 7-pound spring in there with your controller, you could turn it all the way up to near 14 pounds. You don't necessarily have to have an electronic boost controller in there. You could just do the manual one. This is the inexpensive way to do it. Richard, how much horsepower do you think I should expect from a 5.7 LS1, slightly ported 241s, 233 cam, fast 102 intake, throttle body? I don't know, because I don't know how well your heads flow. I don't know what to think from that. But I think that should go, when we did ported heads on something that has a cam like that and a fast manifold, it's going to be over 500 at the flywheel. When factory NA engines dyno, do they ever test to a specific barometric pressure? They test to a specific SAE standard, or they convert it to the standard. They probably have test cells where they can alter barometric pressure at an OEM level. Well, what is it? All dynos don't do that. Most dynos, you have an actual number and then a corrected number. And the corrected number can go either way. It can increase if the temperature that you're running it at, like we run it out a very hot day, then the corrected number is going to be higher. But if we ran it on a really, really cold day, the actual number could theoretically be higher than the corrected number. What's the video title for the intake distribution so I can watch it later? I don't remember what it is, but if you go on YouTube and you search carb versus EFI, or that probably should get you there, or air fuel distribution or something that should get you there. Actually, in the horsepower guess, do we know the NA horsepower? We don't know that yet because we haven't run that yet. Jimmy is going to run that, but right now it has the turbo on it. And so he was just going to run it on the wastegate. Or run a turbo smart dual stage controller. You can switch from low to high. That's good. That's very cool. So on the guess, so again, this is a 2.3 liter S2000 motor. And I know they're 2 liter and 2.2. This is 2.3 because it's a stroker deal. Stock head, stock cam, stock intake manifold, G35 turbo, running only 8 pounds, intercooled on E85 at 17 degrees of timing. And the 17 degrees is not everywhere, but 17 degrees like in the important part of the curve, basically, where it's going to make peak power. So let me know what your guys' guesses are for power, and then I'll tell you in just a minute. I think that the compression is stock on it. I'd have to, I can't swear to that. I'd have to ask Jimmy. Removing the shared intake wall and a small block Chevy port to look similar to a 6-cylinder Chevy. There would be no benefit under boost. The thing that you do to the manifold works NA and under boost exactly the same. So whatever you're doing to alter long runner, short runner, Siamese runner, which I would much rather see even on the 6-cylinders. I'd rather see a divided intake manifold for those, so that one gets one and one gets the other, not a shared one. The shared one can help flow, but like that motor and the 292 and all these things that have these Siamese ports, none of them are lacking for intake manifold flow. So that's not really a problem. So the Siamese stuff isn't really an issue. But you don't need that, and you need it less. You would need greater intake flow, even less under boost. It's like the throttle body situation. A throttle body that might be restricted on a 600 horsepower NA motor because it's, all the air is being drawn past the throttle body. Once we pressurize that throttle body now flows 1500 CFM, so it could care less. It's not restrictive anymore, and it would be the same thing for your manifold discussion there. Are we measuring on an engine or chassis down? This is all on a chassis dyno. This is all wheel horsepower. Wheel or real or whatever your thing is. Yeah, it's measured on a chassis dyno. And it's a Dynacom chassis dyno. That's the one we have at Jimmy's place. 8 PSI. And remember, this is an F-Series motor, an F-Series Honda, rated at 250 at the flywheel by the factory. This one's gonna definitely make more than that. But is it gonna make that at the tire though? Those motors make insane power at low boost. It must be over 400. Actually, you said stroker 2.3 versus 2.0. Yeah. Speed Mullen. Yeah, this is a bigger one. Canceled my date, my imaginary girlfriend to be here. Very nice. I'm sure she's going to be imaginarily disappointed. Sticking with 295. They make easily 210, 220 wheel horsepower stock with a tune. Yeah, they do. In fact, I think if I remember back when Tom was working at Westech, he tuned one for the guys at Car and Driver that took it to Bonneville. And I think his, when he was done tuning it, made 250 at the tire. They dropped the exhaust, and I don't know if they put a header on. I thought it still had the stock exhaust, but they tried different air intakes and stuff. And a lot of stuff that they tried lost power because factory stuff was really, really good. But they ended up making, I think, 240 or 250 at the tire. So it's pretty good. Stroker should make 250 versus 210 plus 0.5 at 7 pounds, 375-ish. Now factor in some chassis dyno loss, 17%. LS2, how much boost can it make? I'm at 18 pounds on E85 and it's holding. Okay. But do you have ring gap in it? And do you have the LS2 block is about, we don't like to go more than 1,000 horsepower on those. I just want to bet on it being annoyingly close to 300 wheel horsepower, but not cross it. It's crossed 300 wheel horsepower by a good bit. So that's not it. I have a 5.3 S10, sloppy stage 2, 78, 75. Okay, I got that. Probably going to want to go to 800 wheel horsepower if you know everything is sound. What should I make my ring gap? Your ring gap should be like 28 thousandths, both for the first and second ring. You guys think a 4.8 truck makes the same horsepower NA, now add 8 PSI? Same story as the S2000. Yeah, that's pretty close. The does a 4.8, does a stock 4.8 make 250 at the tire? I don't think it does it? Or 200 at the tire? Where's it at? It's less than a 5.3, right? Because I know that they're rated like 285 to 300 or somewhere thereabouts. Never mind. I enjoyed your video, the turbo versus centrifugal blower, usable torque. Yep. I'd say 315 horsepower for the S2000 motor with a turbo at the tires. I'm new to live chat. I usually just watch videos later. Well, welcome. This is a good place to come. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask. That's what this is. Everything from after I first stopped talking, 10 or 15 minutes in, then it's just all Q&A. So if you have any questions about your build or what kind of power you want to make or how do you make power, all that stuff. Has it started raining up there? Yeah, we got lots of rain, Matt. We've got a bunch. But the nice thing is it's gotten a lot warmer. But because for a while before it started raining, it was getting cold. It was getting down into the 40s and maybe high 30s at night. Turbo K24 Silverado over a Turbo 4.8. Yeah, not for torque, obviously. Something that's twice as big makes a lot more torque. And this is making peak power at 8,500. It's suppressing that LS with double the cubes, is making less power than a Honda. Well, it's not making less. I mean, it's rated at more power, but yeah, the Honda's really good. I'm on stock ring gap on the LS2. I was curious if anyone found what the usual limit is or the max someone has run. You're running 14 pounds or something like that, or what was your boost level? You're at 18 pounds on the E85 and you're running no ring gap? That's interesting. I've got a question for you. You were showing some roots blower stuff recently. You got me thinking about the El Camino project. Okay. I want to add flex fuel. So when you buy a kit, does it come with a harness? And if so, does it make it plug in your factory harness? You have to wire it. Normally you have to wire it in. We're going to do, once the tunes are sorted out from the guys at HP, we're going to have flex fuel as one of the options. Just saw your most recent video. And if you haven't mentioned it recently here, could you tell us about those new products you're hinting at in 26? No, not all of them. We're gonna have more cams. We're gonna have a turbo kit, which people know about already, and some other stuff. But I don't want to talk about any of it until it gets closer, because otherwise people just get angry about it. And they want to know when it's coming and all that. If you run any EFI type of, I'm scrolling. Running EFI type of throttle body injection stuff on roots blowers. Yeah, I think that I know that they have at Westech. I haven't done it. I've only run carbs on there. I don't think we've run a 4-hole throttle body on top of it, but I don't see why that would be a problem. Does boost by gear for turbo even the playing field against centrifugal blower when it comes to usable power? A turbo has better average power production than a centrifugal blower anyway, so I don't know why it would even the playing field. The centrifugal would be the one that would need to catch up to what a turbo does. How much power loss do you see moving from a factory at ring gap? You won't see any. I mean, when the times that I've done it on these junkyard motors, we don't see any change in power. Just curious, have you ever run gapless rings on any LSs? I've run those on my Engine Masters motor, but not on an LS one. Have you heard of the speed of air component? Yeah, I have heard of those. Dimpled pistons on a gas motor LS. I haven't seen any data to show that that would do anything. LS2 is a cheap engine to replace. Why not blow it up instead of gapping the ring? Mostly known for the application on diesel engines. Yep. I'm curious if they'd offer a test. Yeah, I don't run diesels on engine dynos, so we won't do that at Wastegate. On the flex fuel, when you get that far, I'd buy it. Being it's going to be a while before I get that. Yeah, we have that already on Jimmy's Tahoe. It just needs a transmission. So transmission guys out there, come on, help me out. It just needs a transmission. The flex fuel stuff is already wired in and running right now. Sounds like a test opportunity to do what, Matt? A throttle body blowing fuel into a roots blower would be the most like doing it on on top of a carburetor manifold. To be exactly the same. That wouldn't be any different at all. Richard, can you make a video putting one of your Speedmaster 671 blowers on a Vortec? I don't know that anybody makes a manifold for that. And I don't have any blowers, so it wouldn't be mine. Tester explain lifter differences between manufacturers. Unless the manufacturer gave us some sort of data. Otherwise, it would just be a visual thing. Got the high net worth considering LS2 is cheap to replace. I know. Oh, Bill does. Yeah, I think he was being facetious. Of 0 E85 near me, the only option I see is water meth injection. Okay, that's good. That's better than not having it. Is it easy to set up and integrate with a turbo? Yeah, probably be using a Terminator X. Yeah, the water meth injection, you can get standalone water meth injections like the Snow stuff and others that aren't even integrated into the Terminator X. You can integrate them in as a safety feature for the thing to start pulling timing as a signal from the water meth injection if it runs out. And that's a good idea, obviously. They can be found cheap, but they are rare. I paid $1,300 for an LS2, but haven't seen any more for sale. Yeah. Any future oddball engines? The next one will be the V6, the 4.3 liter. Looking to install an LS9 cam, or actually, I'm also going to be testing the 8.1 really fairly shortly here. Looking to install an LS9 cam, 1.8 rockers, 660 springs, long tube headers, E85 on my 5th gen Camaro. What wheel horsepower should you expect? Would you recommend a different cam for an OE over an OEM? I wouldn't. I mean, unless you want a stock, I don't know what you want. If you want a stock idle and then want more power at the top, the LS9 cam will do that. Because the LS, is yours an LS3 right now? Because if it's an LS3, I can tell you how much more power the LS9 cam makes than an LS3 if that's what you have. Because I don't think it's a lot more than an LS3. There's an LS3 right there. Yeah, it's not going to be a lot. And it's going to lose a bunch down low. LS9. Okay, so, and this was tested on a 5.3, but this is going to happen on a 6.2 also. So the LS9 made more power than an LS3. LS3 made 405, LS9 made 419. So you have about 14 horsepower more. The LS9 is only making more power than the LS3 above 5,500 RPM. That probably would shift down a little bit on the 6.2, but everywhere below that, it makes less. It makes less than the LS3 camshaft does. So down at, I mean, we ran this thing all the way down 2,500 RPM. So at 2,600 RPM, we have 306 versus 3. So it's 20 foot-pounds down. It's 20 foot-pounds down up to 3,000. 3,000, it's 31, 50. Well, still 20. So it's 20 foot-pounds down and below 3,500. And then it starts getting, it starts merging together. So my guess is you would feel like you made the wrong choice doing an LS9 cam if you already have an LS3 cam in it. And unless you're all about just storming that thing at 7,000 RPM. Not even on NA applications, what's great. Guessing everyone stays the same once you have good ring seal. Yeah, they didn't. That's how we ran it. We didn't run it under boost to begin with. We ran the motor NA to make sure the motor was good. Then we took it apart, did the ring gap, put it back together, and then ran it again NA, and it didn't change anything. It didn't show, it wasn't smoking. And I put a lot of ring gap in that one that we tested. It didn't show anything. It didn't change anything. My B18 has 30 ring gap, drives fine. Yep. Surely Jimmy could rebuild the 4L60 in a weekend. I don't know. I don't know if he's done 4L60s, but the 4L60 doesn't need to be rebuilt. It needs to be replaced with a 4L80. Have you ever blown up a 5.3 turbo? If so, how much boost? You mean have I hurt the turbo itself, or have I hurt a motor? Because we did big bang motors where we purposely turn the boost up until we hurt a motor. We've done that many times. Is 2 small carb better than 1 big carb on a big block for daily? What manifold? The real question there is the manifold. What do you want to do with the manifold? I'm extremely lucky in the fact we have lots of E85 pumps in Nebraska. Nice. I'm playing around with Stroker H22 that want to run nitrous on. I was just concerned the gap would drop the NA power. Nope. You won't. The amount that you're adjusting it for nitrous is not going to change it at all. What's the main difference between the Chupacabra and the Truck Norris cam? Noise. Don't the power curves overlap? Yeah, they're close enough to where you wouldn't be able to tell a difference from behind the wheel of the truck. Yeah, Ben, if it's an LS3, that's not a swap that I would make. I would put a good camshaft in it and not a rocker thing. I wouldn't put rockers in it anyways. You have to change. I mean, you were talking about changing springs, which you'd have to do if you put rockers in it, but you should run stock rockers because the stock rockers are really, really good. You should just put the right cam in it. Super easy own drive cruiser. I hate all my carbureted cars versus injected cars. I did lightly rehone it, put fresh rings in. Bill's out fancying you today. Impressed that the C8 Z06 engine has solid lifter. I wonder if they do frequent valve adjust. Isn't the what motor is in that? I thought that's an overhead cam motor. Also running a good catch can, back of the block, valve covers. When is a Big Bang Coyote coming? I don't even have a Coyote, so that's not on the table. I'm pulling the LSX 454 cam. Would you be interested in testing it on something smaller? What cam is that? I don't even have any idea what size it is. We're using a stall converter on the 4L80. We probably will. We want to test converters. So we want to run a stock converter and then we want to do a test of a converter, not at a high boost level. I'd actually like to do a converter NA. So we'd like to do, the ideal thing is to compare what happens when we run it stock and then run it with a cam, and then we run it with a converter. Like which one of those gave the most like change in acceleration? I think a converter is might win that. What's my favorite engine? I don't have one. Just whatever the next one is. Stroker using a 2.3 Accord block. On his. Well, they made H22s and H23s, so you can have either one of those. Double overhead cam motor. Yeah, not sure yet on the intake, but I'll turn up to 6,500. Pretty big cam swap. Yeah, a dual quad would be. I would do a dual quad if it's a tunnel ram. Otherwise, I probably would run a single plane, single carburetor on there, just easier and works fine. What's your least favorite engine? One that's broken. I hate the one that broke while I'm testing it for some reason and doesn't allow me to get my test done. Then it becomes my least favorite. And I get so frustrated with some of them, I just throw the whole thing away, even though it's very, very easily fixed. Oh, you're dead to me. I did a post today or yesterday, commented on a post. They were asking about what car needs a better motor. I'm like, a Nash Metropolitan, 100%. It needs a twin cam Toyota 4AG in it and a 5-speed trans. That would be fine. And not even a super powerful one. I mean, like, like a 160 horsepower one or something. Actually, I think a stock one with a turbo on it, with a little turbo on it, would be good. Although they don't look as good as the ones with the stack injection on it. Those things look great. They look like the old Toyota Atlantic motors. They look awesome. Do you have a favorite power adder? No, just I test everything. That's what I do for a living. And so I test all of that stuff so people can decide which one is right for them, but not for me. What do you think of a diesel inline 6-cylinder Mercedes engine? I think that they're fine. I don't do a lot of diesel testing, so I know that the Mercedes diesel cars last forever. I've got a Coyote engine in my scrap pile if you want to have it to test. I'm in Arkansas. What is it, a Mustang Coyote one or a truck one? Think less about cars that need better engines, but engines that need better cars. I'm way more an engine guy than I am a car guy. If I walk through the wrecking yard, I'll look at the cars, particularly if I see something weird. Like when I saw that 442, that was awesome because it had the old Quad 4 in it. What drew me to it was the Quad 4, but then I'm like, wait, this is a 442. So I don't remember the last time I saw one of these. I wanted the whole car. But when I walk through, I like the motors way more than most of the cars. And I want to bring them all home with me. I think less about cars that need better engines, but engines that need better cars. BMW's V10 as an example, it deserved a supercar, not a luxury taxi. Although a V10 like super sedan, I think that's awesome. I would really like to have a BMW M5 even more than an M6, like an LS swapped one, because I wouldn't want to be an expensive BMW motor in it. Do you have any cool cars or anything rowdy? Well, I did this. I went 227 miles an hour in that. That was a Bonneville car. But yeah, I've had lots of cool cars. How much would you recommend gapping the gapless rings so they don't have a failure? You should talk to the guys that did the rings, and they should be give you an idea. I've never run gapless rings on anything that's boosted. Can an electric wastegate equal an electronic wastegate controller? I don't see why not. If you have the ability to control when it opens and closes, and you can do that with a signal, I can't see why it wouldn't work. F22 H23 crank. I've noticed a bit too much wear on the skirts and block, which looks like it's attributed to the horrible rod to stroke ratio using the bigger crank. I wouldn't think that that's it, since they made H23s and H22s. It's an F-150 Coyote. Yeah, we kind of want to look at one of those trucks and maybe do some stuff with it. Gas Mercedes inline 6 shares the same block and forged crank. They seem very robust and have double roll timing chains. There's guys in Europe making 1,000 horsepower stock bottom ends, just head studs. Mustang Coyote engines are impressive. 10 pounds of boost from a blower, and they're making 600 wheel horsepower. Same block and crank as the diesel. Yeah, I like the. I've worked on the gas versions of those in a 230 SL. Built one of those. Consulier GTP and a K24 with boost. That would be really good. Although the Dodge guys will yell at you for that, but it'd be a way better combination. Because an NA K24 would make what the boosted ones made. I had an M6, but a lot more M5s came with manuals. They're at a price point you could grab one pretty easy. And the one that I want is like an 87 or an 88. I want the early one. 220, that little Honda takes. Oh, the Civic. Yeah, 227 is what we went, and it's actually way easier to do that than it would be in a Camaro or a Corvette or anything like that. Because front wheel drive just goes straight on the salt. It's really good. It's nothing. It's really, really easy. I wish I can LS swap my CT5. The twin turbos are cool, but I like the throttle response and torque of a V8. My friend's 88 M5 straight 6 stick shift with a tune was a blast. I bet. Ever since I ran the Silver State way back, the guys from Cunningham BMW brought out one of those M5s. They brought out the same year M6, and they brought out something else too. They brought out an M3 also, I think. And the cool thing though is I went to one of their car shows and they did an M livery BMW Isetta, which is the one that I wanted out of all of those. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. But and then when they did the M3, they lined up behind a 190 2.3 16 valve Mercedes, and his license plate said Beamer Eater on it, and they're like, yeah, that's not going to go well for you, because the M3 just like trounced him. CT5 Blackwing. So I have an old Honda motor, B20A, had rebuilt for boost. Okay, pistons, rebalance bearing. Was test driving the car, end up having a spark plug destroy itself, destroying the top of the piston. So how did my question is, you had a spark plug destroy itself. Spark plugs don't destroy themselves. So what happened? Why was the spark plug bad? Or did you drop it? Did it crack? Did it detonate? Like, what's the story behind that? At what point would you send the block to get rebuilt or inspected versus go Honda guy and put in a new piston, moving on, other than obvious crazy debris? Well, I would solve the problem that I was just talking about first, figure out what that is, and then figure out what you want to do. If you just go get another one from a wrecking yard, then go get another one from a wrecking yard. If you can't do that and you can rebuild it for a reasonable price, then I would do that. Remember the spring rates you use on a top speed? What do you mean by spring rates? The coilover setup? Cosworth E190 had one of those too. I think I used an impact drill to put in the plugs, probably cracked the ceramic, and so it broke a piece of it off. Yeah, that's problematic. When I use the electric guns even for spark plugs. In fact, I got comments on some of the videos for that. I'm like, well, I'm not putting them in with that. I mean, I am putting them in with that, but I'm just spinning them in after I have, threaded them in with the fingers, and then I just spin them the rest of the way in. But we don't ever impact them in. I hand tighten everything, and I break them free, with a ratchet and stuff, and then use the gun to just spin them the rest of the way out. All I'm doing is reducing the time that it takes to do that. But I'm not impacting stuff in like that. I don't do that with anything. When I undo cylinder heads, I don't undo them with an impact. I don't buzz them, hit them for the first time up. I undo everything by hand and then use the guns to like, spin them the rest of the way off, especially if it's a gigantically long, fine threaded thing that takes forever. So then the guns just work so much better. Coilover setup, 220 miles an hour is really impressive. Yeah, but it doesn't have anything to do like going straight, and you could do that with stock suspension. That's not hard. We had an adjustable suspension only so that we could adjust the ride height, but I don't remember off the top of my head what the coil spring setup was. No, Ugga yeah, we don't try not to do those too much. I mean, on a LS damper, yeah, you just you just go all in on that. Because I remember taking the first ones off, and that we ever took off, I'm like, wow, this is pretty serious. This is long breaker bar kind of stuff before you get a really good like electric gun. You don't want to, you don't want to cause damage. And I've seen people do that. Over tightening stuff is bad. Particularly if it's a thing that's hard to get to, it's hard to work on. That's frustrating. That to me, that's almost as bad as under tightening it, and people don't seem to get that. I'm like, you didn't need to tighten that much. I shouldn't have to go get a longer ratchet just to be able to get this off. I said, it doesn't need to be that tight. Well, I don't want it to back off. I'm like, it's never going to back off. There's a area between it's way too tight and it's going to fall off. There's a right way to do this. And the right way to do this is so that you achieve neither one of those things. It's just right. I can still get it off. It's not going to come off by itself, but you don't go to knuckle buster area. And then you also don't just let it spin off by itself. F-23 block always attracted me because it's the huge one-piece main bridge cap. The GSR block is like that also. A single piece like main stud girdle area. It's good. Although we never had issues with any of that. We ran a sleeved one of those. And then we also ran the dart block, which is we weren't, I think Bonneville's easier on that than shock loading it for drag racing and doing that kind of stuff. It was not nearly as bad. In fact, the transmission, other than the change in the final drive that we did, was all stock. It was an open diff from a Integra GS or LS. Should we label the wastegate springs to indicate how much boost? 88% saying yes. Even a 2JZ has single caps. Yeah, those will go a long ways. Aero cars disappeared. And you mean aerodynamic cars did? When the elbow pops are there, yeah. That's what we do whenever we're tightening something. Click, 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 click. We do our click, click, torque wrench setting. The old calibrated elbow. Have we done a big bang on a 400 small block? Nope. Since they don't have water jackets? No, and I won't ever do that either because that's not specific enough. I would want to do one on a small block, I think, just say 350. Because that would be the most common one. 400s are really hard to find anymore. Good and tight. Yep. Good and tight. Yeah, you got to spell that with a T. Gooten. Gooten. Or you can spell it with a U also. That works. What are the chances that plug debris could make it past the rings into the rest of the motor? I drive it for 10 minutes home, so not great, but there's no good shops near me. You could take a borescope and look in there. You can buy these things really, really inexpensively, and they just work off your phone. And so you just stick the thing in there, and they got a little bendy thing. You turn it. You can look at all the cylinders and go, oh, yeah, that's not good. That's bad. If it broke the piston, and I would be more worried about it scuffing the walls and stuff, because that's normally what happens. And then you can't save the block unless you sleeve it. And then it's better just to get another motor. Good and tight. There you go. I have turboed one, blue piston, 6 PSI. She was a fresh JDM motor with 40,000 miles. I'm sure It had absolutely no ring gap. It did after you were done, though, right? Will your lifters work in an LY6? Yes, all those lifters are the same. Honda had great aero cars in the 90s. Oh, you mean like the Insights and stuff? Yeah, I like the original Insights. 3 uggas and a quarter turn. You're supposed to tighten it until it strips and then back it off half a turn. Yeah, the dampeners those are serious. Those are like some of the axle nuts that are on some cars. The Hondas were like that. And the Honda dampener was pretty tight too. And was a reverse thread also, which threw a lot of people off. I'm like, you're never going to get it off like that. Oh, this gun will take it off. I said, I know it'll take it off, but it's not going to take it off in that direction because that's not how it comes off. That's a reverse rotation motor. Oh yeah, I said, you're tightening it. I said, whatever that thing will tighten to, you've already tightened it to all of it. Insight speed record would be neat. Yeah, they've done that already. The guys from Hasport did. In fact, he crashed it, but that's a really good super aero car for Bonneville. You can just push those and then they go like 100 miles an hour. They already have all the things you want. They have skirts on them and they're super aero and they're narrow and they're all the good things. On the transmissions are where I learned they tighten everything the wrong way. Yeah. Some of those cars would use the starter to break a crank bolt. Yeah, you can do that too with a big bar on it. I have on many occasions left the ratchet on dampeners and done the ratcheting mechanism test. You hit the starter, start the motor, and it goes zing. Please don't make any videos about 8 HP trans. I need them to stay cheap. Jimmy and I want to do one of those. Question: what do you think of an L8T head compared to an L86? I don't know anything about an L8T head. Nothing about it. Nothing at all. I've never even seen one. I don't know how they flow or anything. An L8T is a truck motor. It wouldn't surprise me if it didn't. Either situation wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if it's more like an L83 in meaning that it doesn't flow great, or that it's just an L86 head, which is just an LT1 head. I don't know why they'd make a different one because the one that they have would work for what they're doing with the bigger motor. So I don't know. But other than that, I just am speculating. Are there standalone controllers for 8 HPs or how are people controlling them in swaps? I know there's a bunch of stuff online about swapping them, about putting them in. I think that they have controllers for them now. I don't think it's really inexpensive, but Jimmy is very excited about doing one. I think he wants to, I don't know. I think he wants to paddle shift the S2000 or something on a road course. Max ECU can do the motor and trans, turbo LA, turbo Lamic. Lincoln had a great aero car with the Mark 8. 180 mile an hour top speed. You mean the modified version that they did? Because a stock Lincoln won't go 180 miles an hour. Boost controller with centrifugal blower. Near. Is 10-to-1 air fuel too rich under boost for 93, 91? Yes. It'd be better if it's in the 11s. I would just put it in the low 11s. My buddy used to have a 95 Integra that had some kind of motor worked on. It was a blast. They are fun and they sound good. VTEC motors sound really good, especially if you have a short cold air intake manifold on it and some kind of good exhaust on it. And the VTEC kicks in, man. I'm going to try to put a 6L80 behind my LS2 in the GTO and later a 10-speed. Do you know anyone that sells or has run dual port and direct fuel for LT engines? Yeah, the guys at BTR have done that. Instead of AHP, should do 8 Lenkos. You got 1 more minute. Near. Someone would have to go to the back of the car for the last shift. You just have them all linked together, just the shifters, so that you're shifting all of them the same. Anybody ever done a manual swap on a Yukon using an NB 3500? Well, some of the trucks came with manual trans, so I would think that that stuff would be available to do a manual swap. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will be back tomorrow. It's Christmas Eve, man. If you tomorrow, don't do it tonight. Don't rush out tonight. But tomorrow is when all the guys are going to go shopping. So if you drive out there, that's what you'll see. Is all the guys, yeah, get my shopping in. I mean, not early on Christmas Eve. Later, midday Christmas Eve or whatever. That's when you get it done. On that note, I will see you guys all tomorrow.